Build creative confidence. Beat the inspiration addiction. Join the Writer's Gym. Today on the Writer's Gym, I'm speaking to Philip Palmer. His bio is far too long to fit into any introduction. Please go to BBC Sounds, IMDb, his agency and MBA and everywhere else. But before we go to this interview, which I so enjoyed doing because his passion for what it takes to be a writer, what it is to live every day as a writer and to make that work for you is just absolutely delightful. Philip Palmer is a screenwriter, TV and radio dramatist and science fiction fantasy novelist. Philip's feature film, The Ballad of Billy McCrae, which he wrote and co-produced, was released on more than 20 UK screens in September 2021 and is available on Amazon Prime and Virgin Media. He has a background as a script editor and writes extensively for radio as well as television, scripting 5 seasons of the Radio Four Hungarian crime drama Keeping the Wolf Out. He has also extensive experience working with new and emerging writers. He is a wonderful teacher and a delightful person to talk to about writing. Let's welcome Philip Palmer to the Writer's Gym. It's really lovely to see you, Philip. Thank you for coming to the Writer's Gym.
Absolute pleasure.
I have so many directions that I want to take this in. But a quote that I actually read in an interview you did for a blog, and I will check where I found this, but I absolutely adored it, was, I do like safe formulaic writing when I'm looking for something to read on a Friday night, but when I write, I want to take risks. We've all read so many novels, seen so many films, so I want to know what else and how else. Is else a big thing?
Else it is, yeah. I don't remember saying that, but I think that's absolutely what I like to do, to explore and experiment. I mean, my favourite way of writing, usually I have to plan, but my favourite way of writing when things are going well is when I'm not planning and I'm just flying and going in this direction and that direction. I guess improvising. Like if I could play piano, it would be the equivalent of improvising on the piano. Having the freedom to explore and go in different directions is a joy. Often that's not possible. You have a deadline to meet and you have to kind of stick to what you have. But certainly that's my favourite way of flying, seat of the pants, but also spontaneous. The spontaneity, I think, is something I really value. Did
you always know that writing was where your imagination was going?
From a frighteningly early age, yes. We had a school magazine when I wrote a story about a bank robber who is committing a robbery. He's killed during the robbery and then goes to heaven and has to get through the pearly gates, and they won't let him in because he's a bad person, so he has to break in. So he has to rob heaven, essentially. And I was 14 when I wrote that, and I loved it. It was funny, it was silly, it was a stupid story, but for months afterwards these really tough blokes in school would come up to me, these scary blokes, and say, "Are you Philip Palmer?" And I'd say, "Yes, I really like your story." And I thought, that's good. I can live with that. I can live with, that's my way of getting on with people and connecting with people.
Yeah, and imagination. I mean, it's another thing I read. I don't know how much it is on your mind right now, but I read something about you being caught by the idea of primary imagination and hearing those young people whose way of dealing with things might have been a bit more physical and violent, and yours was writing.
Yeah.
That connection.
Absolutely, and that kind of simplicity and the primary imagination. I think Coleridge wrote about that. That idea of contacting that part of yourself, that element of your imagination, and connecting with it. And I went to an exhibition by Picasso where he did little origami figures, like as a child would do, and they were brilliant because he connected somehow with a very primitive, visceral, concrete thing. So that is something that I would cherish and I aspire to achieve in my writing.
And that is something very important from the word go, isn't it? That imagination, getting out of our own way. We all see that idea that we're all creating the world. We each of us create the world every time we look at it. A lot of it's getting out of your own way, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And not overthinking, allowing your unconscious to kind of guide you. But you have to train the unconscious. I mean, a lot of what I've done in my career is working as a script editor and a teacher, working with techniques like writing beat sheets and synopses and scene by scene breakdowns. And you have to do those things because the more you do them, the more you don't need to do them. You rely on them and then suddenly you can cut-free. If you begin with a complete blank slate and complete freedom and complete spontaneity, nothing will happen. You have to have those techniques to draw upon as well. But the aim is to kind of use the ladder and then fly off the ladder. I know that doesn't actually work with ladders, but it does with writing.
Well, it can, but only once.
Only once, yes.
Depending on how high up the ladder you are at the time.
Yes, absolutely.
But that does resonate very strongly. The way to get out of overwhelm is to understand that there is a spinal column. There are, as with the human being, all the systems working together to create it. And the more you know what they are, the more you're able to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Do you know, I think it would be good to go chronologically, if that's all right, because you are in so many writing categories, genres. Would you like to say how it began?
I think I began as a very, very bad novelist. And I when I left university, I thought I'll write a novel. I never managed to finish it. So that makes me an incredibly bad novelist. I did write a couple of novels, but they were unpublishable. So I got into...
You have rather caught up, though.
And I went in a circle and went back to novels. But I basically, I thought the thing I loved doing is reading. So I began working as a reader. From my early 20s, I would work for mainly theatre companies at that time, later film companies. I'd go to theatre companies, they'd give me a bunch of scripts, I'd take them away, I'd read them, give a report and get paid for that. And that was my income for a good 5 or 6 years. And I was good at it, and I worked for a lot of people. When I was working for film companies, I was earning more than many junior script editors. So the joy of reading is that it's a really easy job. I like sitting down. I love reading. Usually scripts, but quite often I'd have novels to read. I read the complete works of Wilbur Smith. I read complete works of John Dixon Carr and did reports on them. And through reading, I got into script editing, and through script editing, I ended up working as a TV writer. So I kind of went on a journey, having set myself the ambition of writing. What I did for quite a few years was not writing; it was reading other people's writing, which of course is studying. It's a way of studying. It's still the favourite period of my career because I had no responsibilities, I had no anxiety. I would read a script, do a report, get paid. I never had reader's block because why would you? But my first job was working in television as a TV writer, and I was very lucky to get that opportunity. And
did that come through the work you were already doing, or did you apply? How did you?
It came through the work I did. I had a commission to work on a TV show that I was script editing, and I was commissioned to write an episode for the second series. And I'd written the script on spec. Everyone loved the script. There's a series called The Paradise Club, produced by a company called Zenith. Everyone loved the script, and it was going to go in the second series. So that was my break through being a script editor. And then they cancelled the show. There was no second series, so it never happened. But I used that script as a calling card to get an agent, and then the agent got me a job on a show called The Bill. It evolved over the years, but it lasted for many decades, and it was a half-hour drama show on 2 or 3 times a week. And it was police drama. It was a verite police drama told entirely from the point of view of the police officers in documentary style. You weren't allowed to see anything if there wasn't a police officer in the scene. So you never saw someone being mugged. You'd see the police officers arrived after someone has been mugged, which is a really clever convention. And I did that for 4 or 5 years. It was a very well paid, very exciting job. And every month I was commissioned to write a script. I was getting notes on a script, and I had a script in production. And that was my kind of rhythm. So I got really used to working in television that way.
Did it feel... Was there ever any resistance when it's characters that have been established by a number of writers at once? I imagine that feeling very different to having come in through your own work, or how did that feel?
Well, I think for many TV writers, that's very much the case. You're working on a series where there are characters you don't know with stories you haven't invented, and it's someone else is holding the pen, as it were. The amazing thing with this series, The Bill, there were regular characters, and you did have to know the characters. You could get to know them by watching it. But every episode was utterly self-contained. You created all the guest characters. You created your own story. There was no storyliner. So I think of it as a 30-minute play for today, 2 or 3 times a week. And it was a fantastic discipline, a wonderful experience. I had a fantastically brilliant script editor called Zana Bezic, who was inspirational. And it spoiled me for everything else, because from then on, I never had that kind of freedom in television again.
Can I ask you about that? What made her inspirational? What made her useful?
She was astonishingly clever, very charismatic, very insightful, very brutal. Her notes were very clear, but you always came away feeling good about yourself. And it's a real rare gift. Sometimes the scripts were good, notes would be tough, but I always went away feeling good, excited, and ready to do the next draft. And that's a rare gift. I think the first thing a script editor needs to do is leave the writer feeling excited about the rewrite, as opposed to utterly demoralised and you don't want to touch it ever again.
What it sounds like hearing you talk about her is that you had an appreciation of what it was she liked and where it was she wanted it to be going. So the notes were brutal, but they were brutal in order to achieve a common goal.
Yeah, absolutely. There was never a sense of someone else's agenda, or there were some script editors who, without intending to, are kind of writer's monk. They're editing the script that they would like to write. And that's really not helpful for a writer. With Zana, it was always for the good of the show, for the good of the script, for the good of the writer. And I think I didn't have a single bad experience working with her. She was the kind of, one of the best in the business.
It's interesting hearing you give such a beautiful example of that. I'm just wondering, and obviously we won't name names or situations, or anything, but what are the warning signs for you in terms of developing a script, or I guess prose as well? From the writer's point of view, what do you need to look for or communicate to make sure those relationships are useful? I think
it's about building trust with people. I mean, the worry always is that you work with someone who really wants to be the writer and control it, and that's happened to every writer. I wouldn't say it's happened to me more than other writers, but it's a real issue. So it's really important when you go in a conversation with a writer, with a script editor or a director, to give them the confidence that their views are being listened to, that you're taking them very seriously, to be responsive, to challenge yourself. And sometimes I'll get a script note that I don't want to do, and my instinct is to kind of shout and scream, and then I just think about it, and then I will try and do it. And quite often I can do it, and I realise it was a good note. But if I can't do it, if I can't achieve it, then I can say honestly, I did my very best, but this really isn't working. And
I guess here is how it doesn't work for the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And a good script editor will say, okay, well, you give it a try and it didn't work, move on. And because I've been a script editor myself, I know how easy it is to get overexcited by your own ideas. But as an editor, you have to respond to the writer. And as a writer, you have to have a relationship, a creative relationship. It should be a collaboration and a partnership. And there are times when my stubbornness has been folly, and I think, well, actually, they were right all along. And other times where the stubbornness was valid, but I still give that collaboration a chance. It's really important to collaborate and actively collaborate with the other person, rather than the one thing you should never do is put your head down and just write down what you're being told and then do it mechanically. You've got to look people in the eye. You've got to engage with them and argue. So, well, I'm not sure I agree with that, but I'll give it a try, but I don't like that. And then it's a genuine collaboration.
That's something I do remember. I remember having terribly good intentions early on and getting notes, and the thing I would put across the t-shirt of everybody at the writers' gym these days, and I do say this in the session, is feedback is not instructions.
Yes,
you
absolutely.
can do it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you can do it. You can do it authentically, but only, as you say, if you're engaging with it from a place of authenticity.
And that's why I mean, it's good to get script notes in writing. That happens more and more these days. People will give their notes in writing, and that's clear and it's helpful, and it means it's all written down. But nothing will be being in a room and shooting the breeze and saying, well, what about this and what about that? Well, I don't want to do that, but what if? And that is really brainstorming, and that's the kind of the equivalent of American writers' room, where you are actually generating ideas and changing your mind and changing their mind, and new ideas emerging, rather than your first ideas being the only ones.
I promised chronologically, and then I tangented the heck out of you.
Good.
When did we get to?
I worked in television for quite a few years. Again, I've got a lot of TV credits. At one point, I kind of took a sideways step when I had a baby. My wife and I had a child, so I segued into having a job, which is a script editing job, had a development job, basically, which was a lot more secure than writing. So there were a few years where I was really just not writing very much, but I was working as a script editor. And oddly enough, that then fed back into my writing career, because the one thing I've discovered is my planning skills are useless. Whatever I plan to do is not what I will do. So having moved into development, I was working as a script editor on a police procedural show called Taggart. It's a Scottish murder series. I was the script editor on it. I was working with other writers. I wasn't working on my own work, but I joined a writers group. I'd written a stage play, and I joined a writers group with a company called Payne's Plough. So I was script editing Monday to Friday, but Wednesday evenings I would go to this writers group and we'd throw ideas around. Just a very collaborative jam environment with a lady called Jessica Drumgoole, Vicky Featherstone, the kind of heads of Paints Plough at that time. And what they did, which is a wonderful thing, and it's a great way of writing a script. If ultimate destination was to write a kind of 30-40 minute theatre play, which would then be workshopped, it'd be given a lunchtime reading. So everyone had to write one of these, and there were like 10 or 15 of us in the class, and there was no development process, there was no discussion, there were no treatments, there were no outlines. But on the final day of the workshop, which is a Saturday, we went to the offices of Paints Plough, which was off the Aldwych, and they locked the door. I think they didn't literally lock the door, but they said they'd lock the door. And you had to write a script. And you had a day in which to write a script from a standing start. And I think I had to do it in handwriting because I didn't have a typewriter. So the idea was to write a script. And everyone did. And I wrote my script, which was a play called Gin and Rum. I looked for inspiration. I didn't know what to write about. But before I left, I said to my wife, what shall I write? And she said, write a ghost story. So that's something to cling on to. And then I went in the offices. It was quite stuffy in the room, so I went upstairs. There was a rooftop terrace. You could stand up and look across London. Wonderful views across London. So I thought I'll write a play about someone standing on a rooftop looking out across London. A play was called Gin and Rum, and it's about a man who loves London, spends every lunchtime looking out, but can not only see the London that exists, but he can see the other London. He can see ghosts, and he can hear ghosts, and he can tell you their stories. So that was the play I wrote. And as I say, inspired by actually being in the location, looking out, and inspired by panic, because you had no choice but to write this play. It wasn't, I could spend 6 weeks writing nothing, but I had one day to write an entire play, and you have to do it. So the play then had a rehearsed reading at a small theatre space, lunchtime reading, and then a radio producer was at the reading called Toby Swift. He loved the play. He said, I've just got a new job working as a radio producer. He'd been working in theatre, but he said, I've just got a new job working in radio. I'd like to do this play. So he did that play, and that became the start of my entire radio career. And I'd done about 30, 40, 50 dramas with Toby over quite a few years, I think, but all because I wasn't writing, I was script editing, and then I had this little sideline doing a writer's group, and then the play emerged from that.
Before I get onto the career side of it, from an inspiration and short-term have to come up with an idea point of view, it's really lovely hearing that example, because the idea of standing on that roof and seeing those ghosts and being able to say all of those stories there does link so strongly to how you've described your experience of what writing is and what writing needs to be.
Yes.
I could hear an essential you in there.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think for people listening to this, I think that's a really encouraging thing to hear, because when we're looking for inspiration, we're not looking for something that is out there, a right answer. We're looking for something that is us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that fascination I've always had looking out at London. You always, when you go through the old parts of London, you do mentally inhabit other periods and things. So it's an exaggeration of that. So again, without realizing it, I was tapping into one of my passions, which is London, architecture, history, other lives, other glimpsed lives. These are all things that are in me, and I didn't have to put them there. They were there. I just needed a frame in which to express those ideas.
And then you and Toby found each other, and then many on BBC Sounds right now that people can go to. Yeah,
we've done so much together. The second play I did with Toby, he said the first play was very successful. People really got great reviews. Toby said, what would you like to do next? And I said, I'd read a poem called The Faerie Queene at university by Spencer, which is a verse poem, enormously long. No one's ever read the whole thing, but the first two books are absolutely brilliant. So I said, I'd love to do The Faerie Queene for radio. So he said, that sounds fine. So they commissioned it there and then, which was great. So we did 2 episodes, book 1 and book 2 of The Faerie Queene, but not the previous adaptations have basically been speaking the poem out loud with a bit of dramatization. I basically wrote something completely new, but with that same story. So I used different language, different words, different characters, but using that story. We had Simon Russell Beale, David Oyelowo, Holly Aid. We had the most unbelievable cast, and I think that was probably one of the highlights of my career. It was in the best of dramas of the year columns in the Sunday papers, and it was exhilarating. And working with Simon Russell Beale was inspirational. He's an absolute genius of a man. Loved the play enormously, and I really was a career highlight. And simultaneously to that, I had a film on BBC One called The Many Lives of Albert Walker. I had a very close relationship with a director called Harry Hook, and he had an idea for doing this particular thriller set in the West Country. So I'd written that, and that was being produced at about the time of the Faerie Queene. So that felt a really nice time when things were happening all at the same time. The difference being, although I loved working on the film with Harry and he did a wonderful job, it was his film. Whereas working in radio, I'm the writer, it was my idea. Toby was absolutely part of that process and such a wonderful collaborator, but it was our drama, and if anything, it was more my drama than his, because I'd written the words, and that pays less, but it's creatively far more satisfying, I think, to be the author rather than the collaborator.
Can I ask a bit more about that collaboration with the director in terms of how that works? What's that like, and what's important in it for you?
I think it has to be a very intense relationship. In television, when I worked on the bill, it was less intense because, it was a production line. So you'd meet the director and have feedback and build a relationship, but it wasn't an intensely close relationship. The best relationship I had with the director then was an Irish director who had no notes, but just kept asking questions. What about this? Why did the character do this? And that went on for about 20 minutes. And at the end, the director said, that's fine. I know how to do it now. That I thought was a really good relationship with the director. With Harry, it was very intense. We'd known each other for years. We worked together very closely. I did a feature film recently with another director called Chris Crowe. And again, we worked together closely. I was on set. I was consulted on everything. It was a very rich, warm, comforting relationship. Quite often it's not that, especially in film where you are the gun for hire, as it were. But where at its best, it's a kind of marriage, I guess. And because it's a marriage, there will be disagreements, and there will be, you pour that cup of tea wrongly, kind of quarrels going on all the time. But it can be marvellous. But there have been times when it's been disappointing, and that's a shame. With radio, I have to say all the directors I've worked with have been exemplary. I haven't had a single bad relationship with a director. And the way the dynamic there works is that in radio, the director is also the producer and also the script editor. So there's only one person. So the person who's commissioned you will then direct it and will also give notes along the way. It's all about the text. It's as with, I know you've worked in theatre, it's the same idea as theatre. You don't serve the writer's ego, you don't serve the director's ego, you serve the text. The text is what matters.
And you serve the story.
And you serve the story, you serve what the writer has created and the world of that. You make it better if you can, but you serve that. You are the servant of the text, you're not the master of the text. And that's the ethos of all radio directors I've worked with. I think I've had less good experiences in TV and film, but really perfect experiences in radio. And I'm not the only person who says that. It is a unique medium. It is, there don't seem to be any arseholes in the world of radio, or certainly none that I've ever worked with or encountered, and that's quite rare.
I'm not going to disagree with that, but I've only had one audio drama come out, and I'm so fond of the producer of that. But I guess I was cutting my teeth on what you push back on, and I'd love to hear a bit about that from you. I mean, I'm laughing because the example he brought up when he taught an audio drama course for the Writers' Gym at one point this year was, and I had actually completely forgotten this, there was a sound effect that was meant to be somebody opening a bottle of wine and pouring it. All I was hearing was urinal. It was urinal. I cannot explain why. Possibly you could, radio better than I do, but I had to push back on that because all I could do was think, if I'm giggling now. So have you had moments where there has been a pushback, or how do you find that line in the sand between this is irksome but not important and this is important? I think it's really important to speak out, and again, with radio, you have the technical people, the panelist and the sound effects person are there, and if one of them finds it wrong, they will say so, and they will tell the director that just sounds like a urinal, and that's how it will be resolved. I would be free to do that as the writer. It's really important there should be a creative environment where people can speak up, because sometimes things don't work. I did one drama, I won't say which one, where a very experienced actor was overacting very badly, and it wasn't very good. And I said to the director, I have some issues with that. And,
So he went and had a chat, and he came back, and he was still acting badly. I said, look, it's just really bad. So the director went again, and then the actor said, oh, am I overacting? Sorry, I can't bring it up. And then instantly gave a perfect performance. So the actor wanted to know that. They didn't want it to be a secret. The director was dealing with a million things at once, as directors do, and missing the one obvious thing. So I think it's incredibly important that you do speak out in a very polite way, but, or in a funny way. If you say that sounds like a urinal, the minute you say it, everyone's going to hear it, and that's not the story, clearly.
No, it was definitely supposed to be a wine bottle rather than any other kind of facility. But the thing that you're reminding me of there, another of the great T-shirt slogans in my head that we use in the Writers' Gym a lot is "Say the Thing." And "Say the Thing" was said to me by the deputy editor of Fangoria originally. That was where I got it from, as a way to get out of your own head and your own drive to perfectionise and to drown in all of the possible detail that could go in and find what the simple truth was. But the thing is, I don't know if you agree with this, but listening to you say that, the thing that I'm hearing there is how important that is off the page as well. And this is certainly something that's always very important to me, is I can imagine that any director going back to that actor and finding ways to say it, but actually when the actor in your experience turns around and goes, oh, am I overacting? Sorry, right. And, sometimes people just need to hear it, don't they? They need to hear the simple truth.
Yeah, I think actors can be very, very matter of fact and sensible. They're okay. And then they do sometimes overact because it's in their job description. There are shows where it's appropriate to act in that way. No, I think it's good to just get to the point at some point.
And actually, it's a good lesson for writers as well, isn't it? Because it all circles back that you can, especially if you're nervous and experienced, trying to give people their money's worth, want to give them everything you can possibly give them, and it will become too much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I said chronologically, and we're nowhere near novels yet, are we?
Well, that came slightly along the way because I was busy doing lots of different things, and I'm still doing some script editing, writing for TV, developing film projects. I did a couple of film projects which I was co-writer on or script doctor on, which is a nice experience. And I just remembered where I started. I wanted to write novels. Why wasn't I writing novels? So I started writing a novel with no real idea how to write a novel. But the one thing I had going for me is I knew I didn't have any idea how to write a novel. So I did it in the first person because it's like a monologue. If you're in the first person, it's drama writing, and I felt comfortable doing that. And I did several voices, but I started with the character's voice, started telling the story. The first book was Debatable Space, which is a book that people who love it say it's crazy, and people who hate it say it's crazy. It just depends whether you like crazy or not. I care deeply about the world. I think the world is credible and nuanced and complex, but there is a lot of humour in it as well, so I'm enjoying that. It seems fantastical, but it's not. Astonishing things happen, but astonishing things can happen. There is a kind of optimism in the books about the future of technology, because I posit a world in which there is no energy crisis because you have really good batteries. This is one of my obsessions. Really good batteries would be the salvation, because in terms of solar power, if you go out in space and you're near the sun, there is an unbelievable amount of solar power. And you can send spaceships up there and capture the solar power, but you have to put them in batteries to bring them back to Earth. There's got to be a way to do that. Otherwise, it's wasted energy. But we're living literally in view of one of the biggest fusion reactors, that you can envisage, and infinitely bigger than anything we can build on Earth. The power is there. So it's a world where there is no shortage of energy, and there is wealth, there is opportunity, but there's also terrible cruelty. And the premise I had then, and this was quite a long time ago that I wrote this, that there were billionaire chief executives who were conquering the world. Main villain is called the CEO, the CEO, Chief Executive Officer. Now, the concept of billionaires taking over the world was considered crazy then. It's now feeling a little bit odd now, a little bit look out of the window and that's what's happening. So the world of story, I felt fantastical, but was very real. But what I really wanted to do is have a lot of fun, and there was the pain, there's pathos. There's a lot of serious themes in that book and all of the books in that universe, but there's also a lot of humour, because it's all a bit silly, isn't it? It's crazy stuff, it's mad, and I just wanted to celebrate that. And I think that was something I did a lot in the first book, a little bit less in the other books, but I still kept within that world of story. And I think the last of the books, Artemis, was kind of the sequel to the first book, featuring some of the same characters, and so there was a symmetry. But I think more than anything, I wanted to, and this goes back to the point you made at the start about childlikeness, as it were. When I was a boy, I read science fiction all the time. I loved it. It was inspiring. I mean, I was a happy kid. We had a great family, and there was no hardship. But I was never happier than reading a book. My dad would say, "Go and play football in the park." Why? I could be reading a book, you know. My uncle Bob, who ran the local garage, had a massive science fiction collection, so he would lend me books and I would lend him books. And the joy of those books was a really important part of it. When I revisit some of those books, I don't like them as much. Some of them weren't as good. I did like Heinlein, and now I read him. It's kind of like reading Elon Musk, you know, if he could write fiction. So I don't like Heinlein anymore. Isaac Asimov I love, but there's not a lot of characterization, and he wasn't the person I thought he was when I was 14 years old as a human being. Nevertheless, what is true is that I loved those books, and I wanted to write things that had that kind of zest and joy. And it's big, widescreen space opera material, and that I think has been a joy to do, really.
I wish I could make that the bottled prescription for everyone who is coming into writing, is sheer acceptance that being silly, being interested in your own humour, in your own what-ifs, and not, am I interesting? This is the other one we use a lot, is aim to be interested, not interesting. I love how you're expressing that. I'm going to ask a little bit about writing health, writing lives, and just what works for you, because in some ways we are all extremely different, and it is about finding out what works for us individually. But then the more we get to know each other, the more we find out there are definitely things in common. So it would be lovely to hear, if I could start with what supports and motivates you in your writing. You've talked about your ideas, and I know that's going to be thing number one, but maybe also in terms of process, content, hours of the day. What's it like for you?
I think I have quite good rhythms now for doing that, because there have been times when I struggled to write and nothing was happening, and I think I learned myself, and I learned to accept myself. Because if you think I need to write 5 hours a day, 6 hours a day, and then play tennis in the afternoon, I've never been able to do that. I find beginning writing tiresome and horrible. I hate doing it, and I love the spontaneity of writing when you're not thinking about it and it's coming. So I basically have systems for allowing spontaneity. So I might spend all day not writing, and not writing is a really important thing to do. Going for a walk means you, or taking the dog for a walk, or going for a run, you will start to think about the story and ideas will come. So first thing I'll do if I'm writing something is go for a walk, think about it a bit more, maybe make some notes, go for another walk. Do something different, get away from it, read a book, watch a TV show, just doing something different. And then about 5 o'clock, sometimes 10 o'clock at night, I think, well, I'm done for the day, but I'll just write a couple of pages here or a few scenes here, and then suddenly the energy is there. And I think if I can surprise myself into writing, it's richer and it's more spontaneous. So I think that sense of surprise is really important. Coupled with surprise, the other great motivator is panic. And I mentioned the Gin and Rum, the first radio play I wrote it as a theatre play, but the first play I wrote, I had to do it in a day, and I was terrified, but I was absolutely panicking. I did a radio series. It's a fantastic show to have had the opportunity to write. It's called Keeping the Wolf Out, and it was a radio drama set in 1960s Hungary, featuring a police detective investigating crimes and his wife, who's a spy, doing spy stuff. So it's crime and spy stuff mixed in together in the 1960s. A lot of research went into it. I obviously went to Hungary, met people, walked the streets. But I'd written 2 or 3 series, and I had a massive commission to write 5 episodes, which is big for radio. I was also teaching at the time, and it was very stressful, and there was stuff coming in, and I had to do this and had to do that and had to fill in various forms. And I obviously got in a complete muddle, because I looked at my schedule and I thought, I've got a week to write this series in, and I haven't started yet. But I did. I hadn't even plotted the episodes. I made up the plots as I went along, and yet it's the best plotted series of the lot. So sheer terror propelled me. And I did write 5 plays in a week, and then, I had a week to revise them and some feedback, but there wasn't a huge amount of feedback. It was, they were in fairly good shape. I would never do that again, just because it's too terrifying, but it does work. Sheer terror does get you a long way. I would rather have a quieter lifestyle. So as a rule, I would generally push up against the deadline rather than doing it 6 months in advance. I let the deadline motivate me a little bit, but mainly it's about really accepting that this is this is a process where spontaneity and serendipity are important. So allowing the possibility for that, and finding things to do. And we're just been working on a TV script, which is a crime drama. So I've been watching a lot of crime dramas on TV on my computer. I've done more watching of crime dramas than I've done writing my crime drama, but all of that is clearly very relevant. It gives me a depth. So I think allowing everything to be part of it, and you should never feel guilt if you're not writing, because if you feel guilt when you're not writing, then it'll be even harder to write.
There's something in the difference between procrastination and what I talk about as a landing pattern, when you were talking about going for a walk, walking the dog, watching this. And I feel like for me that's come with experience, but it is about acknowledging the difference, isn't that there is such a thing as doing things to get away from the writing, and there is doing things that aren't the writing but are. I physically circle my desk, I'll be further away, I'll be doing other things, and I will gradually, I notice myself moving physically and mentally towards the writing. And have you found something similar? Has there been procrastination versus landing pattern?
There were times when it's just laziness, and you can think I should be feeling guilty. But I think at the end of the day, you're at the mercy of your creativity, so you kind of serve it. But sometimes it is laziness, so I kind of know that, and then you just have to kick yourself. And that's where having a deadline helps, and having objectives. And if you do feel you're procrastinating, then it's really good to sit down and either write a scene or write a backstory, write something that is not in the story you're writing, or write notes about it. I've spent a lot of time writing backstories of characters so that I'm busy, and it's really easy to write the backstory. And then you think, what about this one? And suddenly you've got this extra wealth of material that's there. So I think it's good to just, rather than if you're spending too long walking the dog and the dog is complaining and wants to lie down and have a bit of a rest, then it's worth doing something else, something that's relevant, something that's planning, imagining scenes, writing scenes, or writing backstory, or writing notes about the characters. It gets you in that space, and then you've warmed up. And it's really important to warm up, because if you with exercise you're supposed to stretch, with writing you have to warm up, so that when you're writing you're actually at your best and you're giving the best that you have.
Do you know, I was going to come to that, because for our writing workouts, I do compare it very, very clearly and strictly to the gym, that the warm-up is not a spectator sport. It is your brain and your body finding each other. What for you is a healthy warm-up?
I think writing, going back to writing backstory, I think I do a lot of writing backstories, because then you're delving deeper into the world of the characters, but it's kind of easy. You should know the characters. So I think finding something to do, but also I have things to look at and to work on. I always write a Bible. I mean, obviously with novels I do very complicated grids of which scene goes where and so forth. So I'm planning all the time, but more than anything, the exercise of doing that is warming me up. I'm thinking, well, this goes there. I do it with TV scripts as well. So I'll do a complicated grid of where things go. It might all change later. And then I'll write character sketches and I'll alphabetize the characters' names. So I'm busy. And I think that's my warm-up really, is writing the Bible. For some books, I've written Bibles that are 100,000, 200,000 pages long, longer than the novel.
Longer than the Bible.
Longer than the Bible, absolutely. So the Bible's even longer, I think.
Well, yeah. But if you put all your Bibles together,
exactly. I've outwritten the Bible. Absolutely, I have. Yeah, I've outdone the Bible. I've trumped that one.
When you talked about how for Wolf from the Door, you did not have long. You'd ended up with not long, and there was panic and there was needing to get it done. When you come back and look at something or listen to something or both where you had less time or the situation was suboptimal versus a project where you had enough time, if the work is no better than when you have loads of time, or if the work is no worse than I'm always thinking, what's worse to deal with? Is there any difference, or is that not how it feels?
I think that, there were times when you look at something and think I could have done a bit more there and a bit more there. So there's definitely that process, and having more time does help. It does help. And I think with the radio plays, I could get away with that, because radio is quite a small canvas. They are short stories. With a novel, you really need more time, because a novel is big. It's just massive. A screenplay is a short story. It's a haiku, and a novel is a mountain. It's a monolith. But you can't control it, because sometimes it comes so easily and it doesn't take much time and it just happens to be better. Sometimes it takes a lot longer to get to the same point. What matters is how good it is at the end. The only times I feel frustrated is if I think I could have revised that a bit more, or I wish my editor had said that, and that's a regret. But it's also a positive regret because it means that next time I'll be even more receptive to that. I think the thing that all the writers I know will tell you, and they wouldn't necessarily name names, but there are very successful writers who won't take notes, and then their books come out and you just think, if only an editor had said make that shorter or revise that, and they're too arrogant to do it. That's immensely frustrating because for most writers, you really want that feedback. It's the directness. It's say it, say it out loud. It's too long, it's too short, the ending's a bit rushed. The clarity of that, those are the notes you want to have, because you don't want to be agonising about, I could have done better. But ultimately,
don't be afraid to ask for notes. Push for notes, actually.
Push for notes, and you want negative feedback. You want someone to say, gets a bit boring here, because that's a really good note. It sounds very rude, but a lot of it isn't boring, but this bit is very boring. I can work on that. But I have some regrets about some projects. I wish I'd had more time, but usually it's you do the best you can within what your talent allows.
Is there anything else that you've discovered about yourself and what works for you in terms of getting it out there or making yourself do the writing?
I think variety helps, because I love that I can go from medium to medium, and I think that kind of inspires me, and I can translate across. I can learn things I've learned in one medium. I can then apply those to a different medium. I'm pitching some ideas now for radio, which are basically the kind of ideas I used to do in prose, and I wouldn't be able to do that if I hadn't written those novels, and that's clearly something that the commissioners are aware of. So I think learning from experiences, the variety of different experiences, and I think finding things you love as well is the most important thing. Finding the writers that you love, and cherishing them, and not even emulating them, but remembering this is what the really good stuff is like. And then there's never enough really good stuff around, but when you find it, you cherish it.
What strikes me hearing that again is the enjoyment, that it feels that you have known that what you needed to find was the enjoyment in the different, again, not naming names, but the reason that strikes me is I did work with somebody once who had a screenwriting background and was moving into prose, and didn't do what you've just said, which is think, I am used to this point of view, I will therefore stick to it. They just tried to make a novel what a screenplay can do, and the result was that we're head hopping, we're floating all over the place, rather than see it as a different thing. It was almost like, this is the real thing, this is just another thing, and that's no fun. If you're not respecting the medium, you're not going to enjoy its potential, are you?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we have talked about what makes a healthy writing life for you. I wonder, are there any habits, exercises, because as you know, we are the writer's gym, and it's not just the warm-up, it's the whole workout, in the most relaxing possible way. But are there exercises or approaches or even rituals that you just plain enjoy, or that you might recommend to somebody starting out?
I think the important thing to bear in mind, writing is horrible, rewriting is delicious, is a pleasure. And that's a really good thing to know, because if you've written a scene that's not very good, or a chapter that's not very good, you can then reread it and reread it. I mean, the saying is, don't get it right, get it written, and that is true. You can procrastinate as much as you like, and then you have to start and you have to write your first chapter or your first piece, and it may be terrible, and you forgive yourself the terrible, and then you read it over, and then you revise, and you read it over and revise. And I think that activity of, again, it's the spontaneity of it. I tend to read things, I'm just reading them, and then I could fix this here and add a bit here and add a bit here, and then I do that 10 or 11 times, and actually what wasn't very good has become pretty good. So I think using rewriting as a tool to structure your writing, having the confidence, don't be embarrassed, right? Just get something down. If it flows and it's perfect, that's great. If it doesn't flow and if it flows and it's rubbish, that's also good. That's fine. You can work with it. You can revise and revise. I think there is this that in sport, I'm completely not a sporting person, but I know the concept of the zone, being in the zone in sport is where you want to be, and in music, in so many areas where you're not boxing, you're not really conscious of it. You're not throwing a punch, the punch is throwing you. That's what I met a boxer once who used that phrase. So you if you can get to that place, it's inspiring, but you have to do it in stages and steps. Writing novels, the dark side of writing novels is that it does take a long time. And then week after week, month after month, you are writing and writing again, which is kind of, it's hard work. With the scripts, you can write a script very quickly. But the same process applies that when you're doing rewriting, you're finding materials, and the more you revel, the more you enjoy rewriting, the better it will be. No one actually enjoys starting. But when it's flowing, that's great, and the rewriting is a joy. I think focusing on doing things, all of your ritual. I've got my rituals, which is walking and maybe watching TV shows, but they're all enjoyable things. So if you can make each day an enjoyable process and not feel guilty about it, if you're hating it at every step of the way, that's gonna affect the writing. It's gonna be there on the page. So it's finding the joy of writing, even though it is hard work, because there's no other profession. I've done a lot of teaching and script writing for a few years, which is wonderful. And the great thing about the job, I think I was quite good at it, but what I loved about it is that I never had any anxiety, doubts. I just turned up and did the job, and it was done. I never turned up and was lost for words or didn't have feedback. That never ever happened. So every day was very enjoyable. With writing, there were times when nothing is there, and you are just a blank, and that's really frustrating. So finding ways of working around that. My rituals are quite straightforward. They're just getting off the desk and also getting some circulation in the limbs, because you can't just stagnate sitting there all the time. But finding the joy in writing is my key thing. That's the t-shirt I would recommend you to have. Find the joy.
Find the joy. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Philip Palmer, for joining the Writers' Gym.
Thank you very much, Rich. It's been an absolute joy. Really wonderful to talk with you, and I love what you're doing with the Writers' Gym. I think that's a fantastic thing. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Come and see us again. You've visited the Writers' Gym with author and coach Dr. Rachel Knightley. Production and sound design are by Ashley Lexine, and theme music is by Chris Gregory. To join a Writers' Gym workout online or in London, as a guest or as a member, visit writersgym.com or email thewritersgym@rachelknightley.com.